Hi, and welcome to week 5 of English 151. It's great to have you back with us. This week we're going to talk generally about your critical analysis essay, your comparison and contrast essay, that's due relatively shortly, as well as reflect on chapters 12, chapter 17, and Amy Tan's Mother Tongue, which is a reading that's contained within your textbook that deals with, wrestles with, tries to sort out a dynamic with a lot of the notions and concepts that we've already talked about and that we'll continue to talk about as the semester wears on, right? So as you finish up your final draft, which is due in a few days, think about, again, the notions of beginnings and endings, how your introduction captures your audience's attention, how it transmits or disseminates a thesis statement, how that thesis statement is then developed through body paragraphs, where you're getting into the specific dynamic in an organizational and a critical way of what it is that you're comparing and contrasting these items, whether they're two different stories, or you're comparing and contrasting a book to a movie, or you're comparing and contrasting careers. Either way that you work, the general format is the same. We first need to introduce this, talk about what the concepts are that you're comparing and contrasting, or the items are that you're comparing and contrasting, and then connect on that critical level to your audience why this is important for them to know. How does it inform them? How are they able to use this information to have better access, better agency as they move through kind of their day-to-day lives, right? As you move through the body paragraphs, we're looking for specific examples, specific items, possibly quotations or interviews, or documenting sources that provide support, again, for this thesis statement, for this controlling purpose that you've put out there. And then, of course, when we think about endings, when we think about the conclusion, we're talking about revisiting the thesis. We're not talking about restating it. Remember in the chapters, the lecture notes that we covered that said we don't want to be repetitive in terms of kind of boring our audience or making them feel that we're kind of judging them in terms of their ability to retain information. But we do want to revisit it. We want to make sure we pull the threads tightly that we've developed throughout the fabric of the essay in order to convey that purpose, right? And that context that's important to allow our audience, again, to have that same access, that same agency, that same usability that we're talking about relative to our critical thesis as they conclude the paper. Right? Now, Chapter 12 talks a little bit about selecting and citing effective examples. It talks about why the notion of exemplification, which is a really important compositional device. If I'm saying, well, it's warm outside, right, or it's cold outside, well, what does that mean? How can I connect on a deeper level? How can I exemplify or illustrate the concept that I'm trying to convey? Well, it's cold outside today. It's 30 degrees, but 4 days ago it was -7, right? So on the relativity spectrum, it's warmer today, much warmer today than it was 4 days ago. But how does that relate to, again, the usability or the agency of individuals? Well, again, exemplifying items a little further. Well, when it's -7, it's dangerous to be outside because your skin can catch frostbite, right? Comparing it to somewhere else. Well, it's not as cold today in Milwaukee as it is in Nome, Alaska, but in Alaska they have polar bears and things of that nature, right? So again, we're creating these allusions and metaphors and connectivity analogies that paint a better picture for our reader. And I think what's important here, again, with the examples is we're always connecting to that critical dynamic, right? We're using examples, facts, opinions, samples, anecdotes, stories, in order to support our purpose via making abstract ideas more concrete, generalizations more specific or detailed. And when we think back to the illustrations that we've seen already this semester, things like, Brent Staples giving concrete examples for times that he's experienced some sort of racially motivated or genderized judgment or prejudice. These things clarify concepts that we're already familiar with, but they clarify them in such a way that they increase our association. In the case of Staples, arguably, they increase our empathy, they increase our awareness, and I think to a large degree they can supply some motivation for a significant positive change in behavior, a significant positive change in thought patterns. So I think the power of representation within the textbook is something to be mindful of, right, in terms of incorporating exemplification, representation within our communicative toolbox in order to allow ourselves as writers to more effectively access the points that we wish to access, but also allow our audience, our reader, a greater effectiveness in accessing that which we hope to convey. Looking forward in the course notes, chapter 17 talks about cause and effect. And cause and effect will be important as we look toward our second essay. It'll be even more important as we look toward our third essay. The second essay will deal with process analysis. The third essay will deal with persuasive analysis. But it's important now in terms of our critical analysis essay. Causes contribute to effects. And these things are examined, right, in order to glean some sort of logical appeal, right, to determine meaning and purpose. A cause and effect analysis will clearly state what happened and why it happened, how it happened. It sometimes can work backwards. The happening occurred, now what contributed to that happening. It can be speculative in terms of looking at things that are occurring now, projecting them forward. Cause and effect circulates around these three elements that we'll be talking about quite a bit as we move into our persuasive unit. And those elements are a logical appeal, that on a fundamental human condition level, what we're trying to convey makes sense. Something appears, it feels logical, it is logical when it makes sense. Ethical appeal, that it's true, that it's empirically documented, that these causes did in fact contribute to this effect, or this effect was caused by this series of causes, that we can prove that within the limitations or the requirements that were given. And it also operates on the level of an emotional appeal. Here's the way I can engage my audience in stating, hey, you might not think this affects you, but it does, right? And the cause and effect that Staples examines within Black Men in Public Space, it's something that's significant for races and ethnicities, but it's significant on a human condition level as well, that when you're judged, when an individual is judged regardless of their race or ethnicity, that tends to be a limiting, a negative thing, right? But when it's coupled with these differences and mired in the differences of race and ethnicity, it tends to be more damaging, arguably, in terms of the fact that it operates on the level of stereotypes, it ingrains those stereotypes, and pushes those stereotypes forward in terms that they become, again, working judgments or working generalizations that don't allow groups to function outside of those limitations or those judgments. And we can see, again, through Staples' work, why these things can be and are so terribly damaging. The last item on our agenda for this week's lecture notes is Amy Tan's wonderful essay. It's called Mother Tongue, and Amy Tan is an extremely renowned, very successful writer. Among other things, she wrote The Joy Luck Club, which was an incredibly successful movie in addition to a novel. But Tan is interesting because she, as I said, she's a successful writer, but she says that I'm a writer, but not a scholar of English or literature. And I think that's interesting, because this is someone who has a really solid grasp on the dynamics of syntax, of grammar, of verbiage, of purpose, of context, of audience. Yet she says, I don't consider myself a scholar. I don't consider myself a master of language or literature. And I think that, again, we can learn a lot from that in terms of the notions, the wheels, the dynamic of communication is always evolving. We're always able to pick up new skills in our toolbox. We're always able to reframe something, to utilize new experiences, new developments, new notions in order to make our points that much more effective, or that much more transparent, that much more accessible for our audience. Right? Tan does talk a lot about the power of English, right? English is a second language. English is a primary language in terms of our ability to express ourselves in the language that we speak here in America. It either limits or enhances our possibilities, she says. And I'm wondering, generally speaking, what she means by that. You know, what do you make of that? Do you think that this is a true or a resonant statement? She would also say that there are different forms of English, right? And I think that's an important construct too. We talk differently in the occupational world versus the way we do socially. We talk different socially than we would academically. We talk different academically than we would occupationally. And how do we integrate all of these modalities of communication in order to become a better communicator, a more effective communicator, so that we can maximize our possibility, maximize our opportunities in these specific avenues, socially, academically, occupationally. Lastly, I think, and maybe arguably most important for us, is Tan seems to state that there's a power to envisioning the reader. And again, when we talked at the inception of the class, we said, look, our communication really in this setting is going to revolve around three polarities in any of our endeavors. Purpose, it's important that we know why and how something is written, why and how we're writing and communicating what we are. Our audience, who are we communicating to, and then, of course, what kind of contextual information we need to provide in order to make this, what we're communicating, the items that we're communicating, that much more accessible to our reader. And I think by envisioning the reader, as Tan writes, we connect with that audience. What are our audience's needs? What are our audience's expectations? And how do those both converge and diverge with our own? And how are we going to navigate that difference, right? That gulf, that metaphorical gulf that exists between reader and writer. And again, if we do that, we provide that greater, deepened level of transparency, heightened level of access to our reader, which increases their utility, it increases our utility as a communicator. And that very definitely is a positive transferable skill that we can apply out into our various endeavors that aren't necessarily confined to the academic realm. Don't forget, in addition to the final draft this week of the critical analysis essay, at the end of the week you have a discussion board due. That discussion board is posted. It deals ostensibly with Amy Tan and asks you to reflect on one of the questions that I've just been discussing. So it shouldn't be too time-consuming, but I think it's worthy of our deep and critical thought as we move into these new units as the class wears on and we start to consider more complex and arguably more stakes-driven modes and modalities of communication. So again, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions whatsoever about the assignments, the discussion boards, the essay, general, specific, don't hesitate to reach out and contact me. A number of people already have. I really appreciate those questions. It helps to make me a better teacher, a better communicator, and I think it helps to make our experience in the classroom that much better as I can convey those notions to you and share those notions with others where it's appropriate. So please keep those things rolling and have a great week. I look forward to seeing you during week 6. In the meantime, be well. Thanks.